Welcome everybody to episode 2, season 2 of the FineWatches Podcast.
Awesome to be here. This is exciting. We're on a real roll. Let's keep it going.
Indeed, we reached number 13 in Australia in podcasts for hobbies this week, which was nice. So thank you to everyone who pushed that up. And
That's fantastic.
I hope we've had some great feedback about the new format. So please get in touch and let us know what you think.
And guys, if you are listening and you've always been a listener through Spotify or Apple or however you would normally listen to the podcast, check out the video stream as well on YouTube. So just go to youtube.com/FineWatches Podcast.
At FineWatches Podcast for some reason.
Yeah, well, there you go. At FineWatches Podcast. Or just, search FineWatches Podcast. I think if you search New Beginnings for the last episode, you can catch up on last week or last fortnight and then go from there. Give us a like and a subscribe. It really helps. And we're just trying to reach as many people as we can and have some interesting conversations with some interesting guests coming up shortly too.
Indeed. So let's start with a wrist check. What are you sporting today?
Mate, I am so excited. You don't know about this. I'm so excited.
Here we go.
So we have just signed on a new dealership, a new authorized dealer in the store. And I think I have the last one of these available in the world. They're all gone. It is the Formex Malachite Essence 39. Let me get this up to the camera so you guys can see, because it is insane.
Lovely.
Take it off. So for those who know me and have followed me on the GC Watch Guy channel, you'll know that my beautiful wife, who is a professional pickleball player, she gifted me for my 30th birthday this year the Formex Essence 39 in blue, because I've always wanted one of these watches. They're really interesting. And it was quickly the most comfortable watch I've ever owned. And very shortly after I got that watch, they released the Malachite version. And I really, really, really love Malachite dials. And to get one on my President would cost me a fortune. And so when we were signing up to become Australia's only authorized dealer of Formex, I sent a cheeky email and asked them if I could get a dial. And they said, no, you can't have a dial because this is a limited edition and then there'd be one out of sync. But we'll go search the back cupboard and see if we've got the last one for you. And it came today and I'm so excited. I love it. It's the best. So I'm like a kid in a candy store with my Malachite green dial.
Awesome.
What about you, Ben? What have you got on wrist today?
So I have a Smiley dial Tudor Black Bay. I love this version because for several reasons. It was the original sort of re-release version of these, still with the ETA movement in, which has its advantages, several. One is that the case is thinner than the ones that have the in-house movement in.
Yeah, the brick. Which
is nice. And the other thing is, frankly, if you want to get it serviced or whatever, servicing an ETA movement is probably a little cheaper than an in-house Tudor, and basically anybody can do it. And that movement is kind of the watch equivalent of a Toyota Hilux. Like it's you can smash it against the wall and it keeps going. So, but yeah, absolutely love this. It's the color scheme and everything has me thinking about the Queen's Platinum Jubilee version of this watch. Not this particular model, but a very similar version, which I don't know if you've seen it, Lewis, but it has the Tudor rose hand painted down here with the crown on the top.
Bit of a flex, like a subtle, humble flex, kind of like I've got this version of that watch.
Well, I mean, first of all, there were 300 made. They were given to the fellas with the big hats and everything.
Beefeaters, aren't they? Beefeaters are Queen's Guard.
I think the Beefeaters are the guys with the puffy thing, and then there's the guys.
Know this. I'm British. I should know this.
Indeed.
No idea. It's like, I think it's the Queen's Guard. Is that the guys on the horses who yell at the tourists who touch the reins?
With the big bear hats, absolutely.
Yes.
And again, as we talked about last week, I really love it because first of all, it's within the Tudor branding because it has the Tudor rose. Yeah. But it's just so understated. But it'll cost you about $50,000 more than exactly the same watch without that embellishment on the front, and then
it's
the
not
case
the
back
same
is
watch. It has a slightly different dial, Ben. It's like the Tiffany blue Rolex. It's worth $40,000 more.
Indeed, or the Tiffany Nautilus, which is worth what, $120 million more or whatever. So
yeah, it's totally worth it. No, that's pretty cool, man. And I like the smiley dial because you get a bit more of that charm and a bit more of that character. And like you say, you get that thinner case because you're a bigger dude than me. I've got tiny little girl wrists, and if I try and wear one of those 41 mil slabs, it's like an ankle monitor. It's that big.
It's also, the other thing about the smiley dial is that was how the original was. It had the text was curved, so I'm a big fan, as you know, of the Tudor Snowflake Submariners, and this one is a pleasure to wear. And I've had sort of several through the collection, and every time I get rid of one, I've got to get another one of those because they're a really, really nice watch to have.
Oh, nice, so, nice.
Indeed. And this week, this last fortnight in watches, what's excited you?
Oh, mate, so two things. The first one I want to mention, and I want to give a huge shout out and a thank you to Mr. Nicholas Bowman-Scargill. For those of you who don't know, he's the CEO of FineWatches. He's the managing director, he calls himself, because he's British and very posh and proper. So he's the fourth managing director of his family's brand, Britain's oldest watchmakers. He flew in very graciously from the UK and hosted a huge event in our store this week. I got to spend 3 or 4 days with him just driving up and down the Gold Coast. We had such a wonderful time. We had a nice afternoon chilling out by the pool at his hotel, which was quite cool. Having a gin and tonic. So I'm sort of reminiscing that for those video listeners, video watchers, you can see me sipping a gin and tonic. But I had a great time. We had a great night. So that was like the highlight of my 2023 so far, realistically, was getting to spend a few days with Nicholas, going through the collection. We got to see some of the limited pieces, like the new Fears Christopher Ward Jump Hour that they released. It's been doing the rounds on social media. So we got hands-on with that, which is just stunning. Completely sold out within 2 minutes. It's an amazing watch. We got to see the Fears Garrick collaboration as well, which is, again, just absolutely gorgeous. We had the Brunswick 38 in platinum, which, like, when you hold a platinum watch, it's unreal how heavy it is and just the weight of it. So yeah, we got to see that. We got hands-on with that, and then the rest of the collection obviously is available in our store. So we got to share that with some customers and some collectors, which was beautiful. That was a collaboration between the watch dealers, Red Bar, Queensland here, and Fears Watches. So that was amazing. What about yourself, mate? What's been going on for you in the last 2 weeks? What's caught your eye?
I am lucky enough to be on the press release list for Unimatic.
Ooh,
I received some information which is still under embargo, so I can't say terribly much. But for Unimatic fans and micro brand independent fans, keep a very close eye on what's coming for them, because it's absolutely beautiful. And I've got quite a few Unimatics because I love the variability of it, and I love the collabs they do, and I love the aesthetic that those guys take to market. But this one is awesome, and I wish I could say more. I wish I could show photos, but perhaps if once the embargo is lifted, we might put a link in the notes so that people can see it. But
what I'm hearing is Ben's good news is secret news, and we're not all good enough to know about it. Thanks, Matt. Thanks.
Everybody's good enough. I want to stay on that list, so I'm not going to be the one.
I'll share with the listeners and the viewers then a real watch that released this week, just so we're not teasing them completely with just watches they're not privileged enough to see. Did you see, really quietly, the release from IWC on the new Portuguesa? Have you seen this? The Portuguesa 40 salmon dial.
Yes.
Have you seen this, Pete?
Yes.
Oh my God. I love salmon dials. I mean, I think I spoke last week on the podcast about my salmon fears. I actually wore that into the store today, and then the malachite came. Man, this 40 mil IWC, it's so pretty. The dial's beautiful. So that's, I mean, it's not cheap. I think it's like $7.5 grand US. That's for a 3-hander. It's not cheap, but yeah, it's cool. It's really, really cool. I love that dial.
I like the fact that they've gone a little bit smaller with it as well. Like, I think that, I think that's definitely a trend, and I think that it's a good trend. I mean, some of the most iconic watches ever were released when 32s, 36s, 38s were the thing, and we've been through a period of 40 plus, which was, it's good for my wrist, but not good for everybody. And it's I think it takes, to put something in a nice little small package and just nail it is great. So that's good.
For sure. And like they're doing that with that movement with like, it's got the little medallion on the rotor. Like, it's got that sort of skeletonized rotor with, it's a really, really cool movement. 60 hours power reserve as well. So I like that trend that we're seeing where we're getting longer power reserves. But I do like this watch. I kind of wish it wasn't. Like, it's going to be over 10 grand Australian. It's a lot. It's a lot for a IWC 3-hander, but it is really pretty. So maybe it's worth it.
The other thing that I saw this week, and it's not a sort of a this week release thing or this fortnight release thing, but I went to the Red Bar group in Melbourne, and a chap came with the green version of the Polaris date, with this sort of graduated green in the middle and green strap. And JLC have absolutely nailed it. It's so subtle, and it's a beautiful combination. And it's one of those things that's like, oh God, like, I'm going to have to get rid of my other Polaris and buy one of these. So yeah, no, absolutely beautiful. It's a beautiful watch, and I urge everybody to have a bit of a look at it. Go into a dealership though and have a look, because the photos just don't do the subtlety of the color justice. It's much more saturated green in photographs, and it's well worth a look in person. If you can get into an AD and have a look, it's well worth it. They're just beautiful.
That's a good tip.
Indeed. So this week we thought we'd cover a specific topic rather than the general chat that we typically have, and that is about starting a collection and how to build a collection. And it's a huge topic, really. I mean, there's so many different criteria by which one can build a collection. There's so many price points at which one can build a collection. And so it's one I'm excited to talk about, because there's a lot to cover.
Yeah, for sure. I think it's one of those things where we all have to start somewhere, right? Like, we can't just magically have every watch we ever want. We've all got to go through that beginning step. And I think it's quite a daunting process. I remember when I did it, like as an adult, and you sort of, what do I do? What do I get? And you sort of try and follow the trends online. It's a really daunting step. So, if we can have that conversation and sort of put our knowledge to the test and say, this is what we've learned over the years, and this is what we see with, both customers and collectors, and collecting ourselves, Red Bar communities, things like that, and just try and put out sort of an idea of what it should look like, to start collecting watches effectively, realistically, is what we're looking. This is by no means a definitive list of, you must do this, you must do that, everyone must have a Speedy, everyone must have a Tudor, everyone must have a Submariner. It's not that. It's the things to consider, the things to look at, the sort of the rules to play by as such.
Yeah, it's interesting, because when we sort of spoke about this before starting the recording, the language we used was different. So around rules versus, you mentioned the word rules and I mentioned the word guidelines. And I think for me, this is the beauty of watch collecting specifically. And I guess you can extend that into, art or wine or just about anything. And I think, basically everything I say in the following discussion is guided by my main principle, which is every watch is a good watch if you like it. And therefore, by extension, any collection is a good collection if you like it and it brings joy. But that said, there are many, many different reasons why people collect. So people collect for the sake of archiving completeness, like someone like Fred Mandelbaum, who, you know, wants to have all the Breitlings or whatever. There's collection for investment, which people buy a collection of whatever they're focusing on with whatever guiding thing is. Is it like a short-term return, like I collect Rolex and deal Rolex, for example, or long-term capital gain or whatever. And then there's just people who don't necessarily intentionally collect, but they just buy a lot of watches and therefore have a watch collection of a bunch of things that they like. So I think that
exactly most of us, right? That's most of the people we're going to be talking about, is the guys who aren't specifically following a framework. They're just collecting watches because they like watches and as a topic.
Yeah, indeed. And I think it's also really important to note that collecting watches doesn't necessarily have to be a rich man's game, and it doesn't have to be something that you have to have a lot of money to do, because and the problems that are the same at each level. So if working upwards in price, if you're starting off and you have a budget of $100, then you can collect swatches or secondhand Seiko or whatever, and there's a whole stack of options within that price point. And then
literally 2 days ago, Matt, 2 days ago, someone came into the store with a collection of 90s Swatch watches, and there was, I think, 22 1990s limited edition Swatch watches. All right.
Wow.
Each one, I spent like 4 hours inventorizing this to try and give this guy an idea of what he'd got, because he'd just been collecting. Like, nothing was worth more than $300. Everything was mint, in box, unopened. It was like, the king of Swatch collections, you know? But it was all affordable, relatively affordable. Each piece was a couple $100, you know, $50, $70. It was, if you want to collect Swatch watches, man, you can do it really, really cost effectively and get some like out there stuff.
Absolutely. And then when you move to, I don't know, 1,000, 2,000, 5,000, which absolutely is a lot of money, but you can also collect antique Patek for 70,000. But I guess one of the first challenges one comes across when you're starting out is that each time you move into a new price bracket, the options of interesting things opens up, and it just keeps getting wider and wider as the numbers go up.
Yeah, for sure.
And I think that's where, for me, if you keep returning to that thing of, you know, unless you decide to have a specific theme, which we'll cover in a sec, of, I don't know, 70s Seiko or whatever it happens to be, then you really should stick to that whole thing of the next thing is the next thing that I like. And you can't go too far wrong, because, you know, unless you're really serious about it being a financial thing, an investment, then if you get joy out of it, then you get value out of whatever you spend.
Yeah, 100%. Absolutely. I think that's a really good point. I think, you know, like you say, when we speak about this, my mind automatically goes to that sort of rules to live by. Like, these are the things. And like the first thing I thought of when we say I'm starting a watch collection, I'm going to start buying watches. You've never bought anything. You might have like a Fossil or a fashion brand, Daniel Wellington or something like that, a movement.
Michael Kors.
Yeah, I know. It's a dirty word, but it exists. And so I think the first thing that comes to my mind is just consider, when you're starting out, your budget and value retention. Because 100%, this isn't even 99% of you guys. Like, every single person who gets into watches will not keep that very, very first watch that you ever buy. And you can get in the comments below and say, I kept my grandfather's Seiko, and I've had, it wasn't yours. You didn't go out and buy it. You keep the heirlooms, but no one buys a watch day one and keeps it forever. Not unless you have a limited budget.
I'll hold on. Sorry to interrupt, and I'll let you go. But I disagree with you. I think there are. I think you could extend the point and say basically every collector will turn over watches. So whether that's a dealing thing or whatever you want to call it, doesn't matter. But every watch collector will turn over watches.
Yes, that's what I'm saying. Yeah,
but I think that more people will keep the first, serious watch or the first one that they consider to be part of their collection than you're necessarily giving credit to. I think that a lot of people have that connection to that first piece. Again, definitely leaving aside the heirlooms and that stuff, but I think that a lot of people.
So my point being is that it's more in that way of like, you're probably going to make a mistake. Is that you're going to buy something and it's going to cost a lot of money. It's going to be one of those very expensive pieces that you never bought. It might be $200, but you might not have spent $200 before on a watch. It could be $2,000 or $20,000, but it's a lot of money. So just consider that watch is likely not going to stay in your collection as the perfect. It's not going to be the one, right? That first piece you buy isn't going to be the one. You've got to make your way through the nightclub to get to the one, okay? You can't just jump in and be like, I'm getting the Zeitwerk minute repeating ALS day one and I'm perfect. It just doesn't work. So think about that value retention is what I'm saying, is that if you're buying your first watch and you want to have the boutique experience and you want to go into Tag Heuer and buy your Aqua Racer at like $7,000, fine, great. You'll have a great time. They'll give you nice champagne, hopefully, and they'll talk to you really well, and it'll be a beautiful experience. You're going to walk out of that store, and if you don't love that watch, the haircut you take is going to really hurt. So consider that quite seriously when you first start, is find the watch that attracts you. Let's say it's a Tag Aqua Racer, and you really like them, and that's the one I want. I'm going to go and buy one. Have a look at just how can I get the best value out of that purchase. It may not necessarily be that you go into the boutique and buy that. Now, I do think that at some point in your watch collecting journey, you should buy something brand new from a boutique, because it's kind of cool. And like, I say that as a pre-owned dealer, but like I've bought Omegas at retail for my wife. Well, she bought, but I was with her. We've bought Tudors, Rolexes. What else? A Bulgari. I bought a weird Bulgari, and I lost a ton of money on it, but it was a really cool experience. And every year they send me a Christmas card, and it's really nice. So I do think that you should probably have that experience at some point collecting. But when you're first starting out, don't be afraid to think of resale value. Don't be afraid to think of value retention, because some of those haircuts you hear about people taking on boutique purchases it's painful.
I'll agree and extend on your comment there, that I think the most consistent piece of advice that I give people who ask me about watches and buying and collecting and what should I buy and all that is probably buy very well pre-owned, if you can, because the same haircut that everybody knows about with cars and all that is pretty much the same with watches. And okay, we talked last week about certain brands having, selling over retail and all that sort of stuff, but that's a completely different issue. And for a vast majority of things, the value goes down. That said,
it's the exception, not the rule.
Indeed. But there are certain brands that hold more value than others in that pre-owned market. And the other thing is that, and then the value stays much closer to what the resale is likely to be. And then the other thing is, if you, it's a bit of a sort of an advanced point, but if you're buying from overseas via, I don't know, Chrono or eBay or wherever else, then in sometimes if you're luckier about foreign exchange rates and stuff, the thing can go up because you bought it at a time when the dollar was strong or whatever as well. Yeah. But yes, definitely, I think that's one of the first things to consider no matter what you're buying. And I would go as far as to say, not only consider value, but definitely explore secondhand. And I think that it brings us to another point around collecting, is that like most things of objects of desire, most people look at photos of things and follow things. They have the poster on the wall of whatever car or whatever it is they want. They have the desktop picture of the watch they want. And then they go and try it on, and it doesn't fit the wrist, or whatever. Or you have it for a while and then you buy something else, and then you realize that the finish or the pusher or crown action isn't quite as good as the other thing. And therefore this object of fantasy then becomes the practical reality of owning that particular piece. And so try in the early stages of buying a number of watches to buy different things. So buy a time only, buy a chronograph, buy a dive watch, a sports watch, pilot's watch, or whatever, and work out what it is. Down to things like, you mentioned the Portuguesa before, I always wanted one of those. And then over time, before I could actually afford one, but by the time I got to the point where I could get one of those, I don't want one. And the simple reason for that is nothing to do with the design or whatever. It's still just as beautiful as before, but they don't have lume. And I basically have a pretty solid guideline on what I buy, is that the watch has to have lume, because if it's the one that's sitting on my bedside table at night and I want to check the time, I want to be able to see what time it is without turning the light on. So, there are subtleties like that around different models and watches as part of a collection that you learn over time. So diversify the collection to start with is a good starting point.
And that's and sort of like circling back to what you're saying is that there are so many watches that do so well. Once the hit's been taken, once you're buying it, well pre-owned, or you're buying it, even a year old or 6 months old, they are so stable at that point. It's unlike most other industries. The watch world is not like most other things where, like, you can buy Tag Heuer Aquaracers pretty much consistently within $1,000 bracket, up or down, for 20 years. Like, they just stay there. We say here as well, the new Seamaster, like, it's a beautiful watch. The new Omega Seamaster 300, any dial color you want. Like, you buy those pre-owned, they trade all day, every day, within like $500. That's it. And once they've hit that range, then they hit it straight away. So it goes out of the store down to that point. It's not that far. Like, I think realistic for the last 2 years, they've been at like 5,500 Australian, and they've sat there forever. Like, it's one of the safest buys in pre-owned watches for not investing. It's like, buy a Seamaster, wear it for free. Like 6 months, a year, wear it for free. Like, they're great. So there's so many watches that do that just do that research, have a look, find out what you love. I mean, if you come here and you say, "Oh, Lewis, I really love Rainbow Daytonas," well, good luck to you. You ain't gonna get one. Like, if you're starting out, look at things like Tag Heuers, Aquaracers, Carreras, jump up into like Omegas, pre-owned Speedmasters, Seamasters. They're really good value pieces. I would say for those first one or two watches, avoid going into JLC and splashing 25 grand on a Reverso, because it's just not going to be stable. They're amazing watches, and I wish everyone experiences a Reverso in their collection at some point. But they're just not a smart buy for value retention when you're first starting. Like, when you're first getting into this hobby and discovering what you like, and like you say, onto that next point of, like, you're going to make a mistake. You don't be afraid of that either. Like, don't be afraid to make those mistakes when you're experimenting, when you are, checking out the different models and do I like pilots watches? Do I like chronos? Do I like divers? Do I have to have lume because I need to see what time it is at night because I don't have a phone by the side of my bed? Ridiculousness that Ben just said. Like, don't be afraid of that. As long as you've adhered to Lewis's rule number 1, and I said rule because it's a rule, Ben, thank you very much. You'll have better success, and you'll feel better about it at the end when you do make that mistake. You know what? I can trade that back into a dealer and I might have lost like $500. Then that's fine. Or I can go and flip it privately and I've pretty much worn it for free. And yeah, maybe I don't like Tag Aquaracers. Maybe I don't like Seamasters or Speedmasters or whatever it is. But if you've bought well, and you've done the research properly, don't be afraid to make those mistakes. I mean, we've all done it. I bought a Speedy Reduced, like really early on in collecting, Speedy Reduced. I was like, yeah, this is cool. It's automatic. It's a Speedy. It's a Speedy, guys. It's the same thing. It's exactly a Speedy Pro. It's just a bit smaller for my girly wrists, and it's automatic, so it's way cooler. And it just wasn't for me. Like, it was the little brother, and I should have bought the big one. So I went out and got sold that. I bought it well, so I was okay with that mistake. And I got the big one, and I loved it. And I wore it for like 2-3 years, almost every day. Don't be afraid of having those revelations and experimenting, like Ben says, where you are checking out what you like, because there's so many guys like Ben who must have lume or must have big dials, or perhaps your eyesight isn't the best and you can't read dates, so why are you buying all these watches with little dates at 6 o'clock or 4:30? Like, experiment, figure out what you like, and then keep going from there and build upon that as your collection, which is a great place to start.
I think the other thing that you get a handle on when you own a bunch of watches is, and this might be a controversial statement, but I think it's sort of like cars and certain other things, like there is a really appreciable difference at the bottom end of the market between a $200 watch, a $500 watch, and say a $3,000 or $4,000 watch. But from sort of 5 to, depending on the brand, 30, there is a much smaller delta between the tangible quality of what you have in your hand in terms of things like crown feel and pusher feel and case finishing and all that sort of stuff. And really the true rare air of hand finished movements and all of the stuff that people like Mario Bro, document very carefully. You don't get that stuff until you're starting to buy handmade watches at ridiculous money.
And you're probably not going to appreciate it early on, right? Like, if you're just starting, you're probably not going to appreciate a Grubel Forsey. Like, you're going to say, oh, it's pretty, but you're not going to understand why.
Oh, no, look, I think that it's pretty rare that someone would go and buy that. But I guess the point being that, for example, if a lot of people might buy, say, an IWC Big Pilot, and that's, I think that personally, I like them. They're a good watch and everything. But I think that for a time and date only watch, you're definitely paying a lot for the brand. Yes. And I think that the point being that if I'm a first-time collector and I'm looking at getting, a pilot's watch in that style, there are other brands that offer very, very good quality watches that the wear experience and the aesthetic experience of a Big Pilot, you're going to get that without spending Big Pilot money. And so, don't be afraid when you start out to try different brands and try some micro brands that do something similar to the big famous brands that you pay a premium for.
Well, I guess that's like, the IWC, if you love a Flieger, like, you can go out and buy an IWC Flieger and it's going to cost you like $7,000. That's fine. But for $1,000, you could get a Stover, or you could get a Laco, or you can get 90% of that feeling from the more affordable point. And then if you love it, go out and get your.
And there's loads, Fortis, Zin, like there's loads of people that do a similar thing. So, so I guess that kind of covers off the first rule or guideline, which is try different things, buy what you like, don't be afraid to make mistakes, and be careful. In terms of just one thing before we move, I guess, to sort of making decisions about theming and everything, is going back to what I was saying about the used market. A lot of people sort of get stressed about box and papers and condition and all that sort of stuff. Box and papers, definitely important because it's a sort of a complete set. And it in 99.9% of cases obviously adds value to a watch, and sometimes significant value to a watch. But the general rule to me, if you're buying something secondhand, is buy something. Whoever's going to buy it off you is going to look at the same things that you're looking at. So does it have a big nick out of the corner of the case that's going to do your head in every time you look at it? Do you really care about box and papers? And if you don't, probably somebody else won't as well, because the watch is in great nick. So, but also remember that if you buy a watch that's a little cheaper because it's in very good or good condition as opposed to mint condition, then when you go to sell it, you are going to be selling in the very good to good price range, not the mint price range. So always be aware of that. I guess moving forward to the idea of what to collect and how to build a collection, I think there's the baseline. The easiest one is, as I said before, just buy what you like. And if you have a Speedy and an Invicta and a Hublot and a Rolex and a Patek,
but don't buy an Invicta. Like number one, that should have been number one rule. Sorry,
number one rule: don't buy an Invicta. But definitely, if that's where your collection ends up and you enjoy it, excellent. And that's definitely a very valid way of collecting. And I think that's the way that almost every new collector collects, for sure.
Yeah.
Then there are so many categories, and I think that there's really no right or wrong with this. So you can theme on a brand and only collect Seikos or Rolexes or Pateks or Zin or IWC or whatever it is. You can theme it on a type of watch, so a sports chronograph, a racing chronograph, a pilot's chronograph, a pilot's watch, a diving watch, or whatever. And again, perfectly valid. You can go with vintage and buy basically anything vintage. So, and each of those areas has enough of their own esoteric knowledge that's specific to that area of collection that it's still interesting and thrilling to build up the knowledge over time. And whatever your theme is, absolutely guaranteed there's going to be a forum or a group somewhere that also shares your theme and can help you to develop your knowledge and collection within that theme.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if you've got a fetish for Speedmasters, you can get any kind of Speedy you want. Like, there's just thousands. You can really build a collection literally on models, not just brand. It's
absolutely,
if you like Seiko divers, you can just go ham on like hundreds and hundreds of Seiko divers. Like, I would say, like, when you're starting, you're new to collecting, just be careful with vintage. I mean, I think we've probably both been caught out here and there with vintage things of like, this looks amazing, the deals are so good, and then it's just kind of too good to be true, and the bill is worth more than the watch to fix the damn thing. Like, be careful with that. Vintage watches are amazing, and they've got so much charm, and just the history of it all. Like, if you can get like vintage GMT Masters and just beautiful old watches, even beautiful old Seikos, like, you can pick them up so cheap that you can sort of think, oh, this is a great deal, but like, trying to fix a vintage Seiko could cost more than the watch is worth. And then you're into this thing for thousands that really someone's only going to pay 200 for. Like, you've really got to love that stuff. And I think it's probably something best reserved for a little later once you've figured out the first couple of things of like experimenting what you do like. But just like you say, Ben, you can really build great collections off of theme. And like we've both know guys that do this. Like, I know guys who do it on Speedies. I know guys who do it on like Seikos, like you say. And it's really cool. Guys who only buy Rolex, and yes, maybe they only bought Rolex for the wrong reasons, but initially, and it's worked out for them, and now they're sort of hurting. But that's a valid way of collecting. If you just love Rolex and all I want is Rolex, then go out and get Rolex. Like, go and get yourself an OP. Go get yourself a Datejust. You want a fluted and a Jube, and you want an Oyster and Smooth, like, go do that. They're different watches. They feel so different that it's totally valid to do that. There's nothing wrong with it at all. And that can lead you down so many cool rabbit holes and avenues of just collecting within brand, within chrono, within diver. It's a great way to do things. If not slightly limiting to what you're experiencing, but if that's what you love, then hell yeah, go for it.
I think that Rolex is a really perfect example, and it goes back to what we were talking about at the start of this about people's sort of motivation with collecting. And I think that Rolex, it's still not wrong or bad to collect Rolex. I think the problem that you've alluded to there, though, is not a problem with a theme or a brand. It's probably a problem more with the motivation of a collector. So if one can collect Rolex, and if you're collecting 1930s Tiger Princes and that kind of stuff, and through to something that you bought from an AD today, that's likely to be a tremendously interesting collection with very complicated knowledge behind it, and long development of the experience of finding it and all that sort of stuff. But I think that people need to be very, very careful of collecting as an investment. It's like anything. It's you might luck in and buy something that the market then appreciates in value because the market happens to want that, like art, for example. But you really need to be right across the financials of the market, the movements of the market, trends. You want to know, and especially because, as we talked about, sort of new watches, either from a dealer it will lose, or something that's a newer model, say last 5 years or something, will reach a sort of a second-hand plateau and then stay there for a while, assuming that the condition stays the same.
Yeah.
But the cars are a perfect analogy that MX-5s, common as mud. Buy one, it went down. They were very cheap for a long time, and now the first models are skyrocketing because people want that. So, but you would really want to know what you're doing when you collect for money. If
it's not something you sort of recommend people do to start with at all, like that shouldn't be your main principle, your main goal here. It shouldn't be collecting for investment when you're starting a watch collection. You're right.
Look, I think I would go further and say, it's very okay if you're somebody who works in the industry and you have the opportunity to buy things at a very good price as they come through or whatever, and you're buying well below market and you're pretty much guaranteed to make money on it. Other than that, for a vast majority of brands, models, ages, categories, everything, it's pure market luck. And it's like wine investing or art investing. Like, okay, there are certain artists, and okay, there are certain brands and certain vintages of wine and all that sort of stuff that are pretty much going to hold their value. But there is always a risk that the economy tanks, there's a recession, and that's when you need your money. And unless there's been a significant capital appreciation, there's a good chance you're going to lose money on it. So I never really recommend to anybody to buy watches as an investment, and always buy something that you are willing to pay the price to have that thing on your wrist and enjoy it, as opposed to buying it purely with the motivation that you're going to make money on it. Certainly there are watches, as we've talked about, that are a buy and wear, and it's pretty much as good as money in the bank, inverted commas, for the people who can't see me do the inverted commas on the video. But in most cases, be careful about that. Just going back to the idea about vintage collecting and the analogy with cars. So in cars, there are three things that dealers and people buying and selling cars look at. You look at the mechanical condition, the condition of the interior, and the condition of the exterior. And watches are kind of the same, and slightly different. And if you call the interior the face and the hands, the exterior the case and the bracelet or the strap, as it may be, and the mechanics, the internals of the watch, those are also the three things that you need to consider when you're buying a vintage watch. And it could be, once you know a little bit more about the repair costs and all that, that you find an old watch that has an absolutely magnificent face where most of them are faded and garbage, and a nice case, and you know what the internal repair costs, it might still be worth buying that watch. or one of the other. As long as you have 2 out of 3 and the repair cost is a reasonable thing, and you know what the repair cost is, not just guess, then that's a good sort of broad rule of thumb about how to buy vintage. And I guess the other thing to be aware is that obviously with vintage, just like cars, like there are a lot of people out there who, without any bad intention, like someone who owns a watch who gets something fixed, but they don't get a genuine set of hands, or they don't get genuine parts put in it, or whatever it happens to be, then the watch is not original. And then there are a whole lot of, dodgy folk out there who,
really
fix
hard
something.
to know. Like, even for experienced people, like, you can get slight different, like if you use Rolex as an example, like GMTs, you can get slightly different era hands, or different dials that are a couple of years here and there, and they're not original. That can be really, really difficult to know unless you're like deep in the hole of Rolex. Like, vintage is a minefield, and I know you love vintage. It's one of your things that you're really passionate about. And to me, I just think if you're starting, man, you're going to want to know someone, or you're going to have to be really confident about your knowledge and ability to gain knowledge to just jump into vintage within, the first few months of starting a watch collection.
I wouldn't. I certainly wouldn't suggest that vintage is definitely, there's 2 ways. Like, either start collecting vintage, but know that a good portion of what you're likely to buy is rubbish, because even advanced vintage collectors cop rubbish and
buy my wares, they're shit.
sometimes expensive rubbish, but but all the same rules of buying anything apply. Like, if you're dealing with a seller that has high reputation, whether that's just high feedback on one of the platforms, or is a very, very well renowned high street dealer with bricks and mortar, then if they are telling you, if they are representing this is an all original model, and clearly they're a long established business, then chances are that you're covered by fair trading rules and things, that they can't misrepresent that.
It comes back to that old adage of buy the seller, right? Like, if you're buying a watch and the store has got hundreds of 5-star Google reviews, well, that's a pretty good sign you're going to be okay. Like, if you can go onto a forum and say, hey, tell me about Joe Blow, is he okay? And like 25 people within a minute go, yeah, he's the man. Like, you're probably okay. Like, if try and get that community feedback, or the Google feedback, things like that. Conversely, if you know a dealer, like if you know someone who's into watches and they're a dealer, and they go, you know what, don't touch that guy. Like, just steer clear. Like, we both know these people, and they get like cult followings on forums of being the man. And you look at it and you go, man, I know of like 3 dodgies that he's done. Like, but you can't really put it out publicly because you don't have the facts. Like, if you know someone, go to them. Get to find someone that's trusted, or Google reviews. Like, stores, even guys who don't have brick and mortar, but they have a store on Google, it's a great resource. Like, just check out Google reviews, read them, read the 1 stars, like, see how the store responds, see, like, get that feeling. Like, if you're going to go and buy anything of high value, just do that research about who you're buying it from. If you can find someone you trust, go there and stick there for that first period of getting you in the door and sort of holding your hand through it. I know, Ben, you've probably done this with customers. We do it all the time, of like, people who want to start, like, all right, let me hold your hand through this for a bit. You don't have to buy from me. That's fine. Like, I'm just going to help you, point you in the right direction. Like, just help people out that way. That's the way to go, I think, for the most part.
Absolutely. And don't be afraid to ask. I think most people who deal watches typically are watch enthusiasts themselves. And if there's one thing that you can be absolutely assured of, that watch enthusiasts like talking about watches, and most people will be very willing to help you to find something. I think that, I think that's the key thing, is just experiment, have fun, diversify early in your collection before necessarily going down a specific path. Although if you just like speedies or chronos or whatever, just go with that as well, because there's definitely not the wrong answer. And then I guess, sort of an overall rule is just know that this is an addiction, and know that when you start that, it's just one more watch. There's no such thing as just one more watch. It just doesn't exist.
Yes, there is. Jody does it.
Well, okay, but it's amazing how many just one more watches there've been there. So it's I think that this is the beauty of these little machines, is that they're all the same. They all have a big hand and a little hand, unless you're talking about Renaissance or Urwerk or something like that. But they all have a big hand and a little hand. They all tell the time, and they all have similar things inside and all that. But there are so many different things that you can do and focus on that bring pleasure out of this. I think that
something I love seeing as well is like guys who mark an occasion with a watch. Like that's something really cool. Like these things are sentimental to us, and a lot of people get into watch collecting for sentimental reasons, like they've been inherited something from their father or their grandfather or their whatever, and then mark the birth of a child or a wedding or a job promotion or a new job. Or like marking an occasion is a great way to start collections, and use it as a symbol of success for yourself, like a symbol of your own success within whatever you're doing, whether that's financial, personal, relationship, whatever it is. Like it's a good way to just get that ball rolling and start making all the mistakes down the road to addiction that we all make.
I think the other thing is that it's important to note that I don't think that there's, and this is definitely debatable, and, please let us know in the comments or whatever what you think, the minimum number is. But to my mind, I don't think there's a minimum number of
255.
I don't think there's a minimum number that necessarily constitutes a watch collection. Like, it's arguable that 2.
It'd be at least 2, right?
Great. Well, absolutely.
Otherwise, you just got to watch.
Absolutely. But presuming that it's more than 1, there's, the other thing that people can collect with watches, as Lewis has just talked about, is, perhaps tying it to experience or whatever. But in one of the other episodes in season 1, I was talking to a chap who made the point that we talked about Grail watches in the first season, and he alluded to the fact that, in fact, it's good to chase Grail experiences. Now, Grail experiences can be a number of things. So one is, you tie that watch to that Grail experience of marrying your sweetheart, or having the child that you wanted, or graduating from university, or getting the job you wanted, or whatever. So that in itself is a Grail experience, and the watch is a symbol of that experience. But to me, there's also another aspect of that, which is that once you start buying watches and collecting watches, and particularly if it's not just a case of, I saw this good deal on an X and I've always kind of wanted one, so I got it. But if you are a collection of, say, Speedies, as we've talked about, and you've always wanted that specific caliber with those specific hands and a full set and a da-da-da-da, and they don't come up, and then you've spent 3.5 years looking at it, and you had one in your hand, but it wasn't quite right, and all that sort of stuff. The satisfaction of actually finding that piece, the right piece to add to your collection, is in some ways just as much of a buzz as it is to actually own the watch itself.
Yeah, so the thrill of the hunt, for sure.
So that's the other thing, is that, don't necessarily go, I have to collect a brand or a model or a type or a vintage or not vintage or whatever it is. Make a decision about how you want to buy watches, how you want to find them and acquire them, because there's a lot of fun in actually finding them somewhere that isn't eBay or Chrono24 or whatever.
Yeah, like every time you go to a new town, just go to the watch shop, like go to the little quirky family jewelers, like the estate jewelers. Just like, it's so much fun just trying to find all the little holes, and every now and again something comes up that you've never seen before. That's a great way to do it. It's more of an old school way of doing it, because the internet sort of ruins that collecting journey, because everything just seems to be instantly accessible to you unless it's extraordinarily rare. But when you're finding things is so much more exciting for the most part. I find as well that you don't get that thrill from, oh, it popped up on Chrono. Oh, it popped up on eBay. Like, no, I'm like in this weird city in this weird country I've never been to, and like all of a sudden this bloke who doesn't speak my language has this watch, and I'm going to try and negotiate it. And did I pay too much? Did I pay too little? Like, is my credit card going to get blocked because I'm in a foreign country and they think I'm getting scammed? Like, all that stuff's great fun. Like, yeah,
that's happening to me in Japan.
It's just have fun, right? Like, have fun with this journey. It's so much fun. There's ups and downs and bullshit to deal with, and like politics and people, and just like the internet rabble of don't buy a Speedmaster, it's got no water resistance, and all that shit that you deal with. But first and foremost, guys, like, have fun collecting, because we're all balls deep in this hobby and we love it, and we're going nowhere. We're hooked. It's got its hooks into us, and it's just a great experience. And the community around watch collecting can be so rewarding. So, just start, be safe with it, experiment, try, see what you can find, and then go from there and enjoy it.
I think the other thing is that quite apart from financial value, say the Paul Newman Daytona or the Eric Clapton Universal Genève or whatever, like, quite apart from that, there is value in, I mean, they are really tangible examples of where financial value is added to a watch.
Yeah, absolutely.
But there is part of the beauty of collection is that, because typically a watch, and especially not just vintage, but sort of older pre-owned stuff, chances are there's thousands of them. And, if you collect Speedies, there's thousands of Speedies, thousands of people. You see thousands of people with a Speedy. But there's something really cool, and most watch collectors love the story, hearing the story of your watch as well. And that shouldn't be, discounted as something that's important and delivers the joy of owning a watch, is having a really cool story of, this watch used to belong to, or I found this watch, this new old stock in this tiny shop in a mountain in Switzerland, and he'd had it for some reason, he never sold it, and like that's super cool as well.
And that's the kind of stuff like we want to hear from the listeners and from the viewers on YouTube, especially, throw in comments of like, what was your start of your journey? Like, how did you start collecting? What words of wisdom would you have? What are your words of advice for people collecting? Do you agree with what we're saying here, or do you completely think we're full of shit and like you should only care about investing and it should only always be about the money, or you should only collect vintage, or you should only collect modern? Like, let us know in the comments below, because it's really interesting, and that's where watch collecting becomes such a rich melting pot of society, because we're all from different walks of life, from all different budgets, all different experiences that we pile into this hobby together. And so we want to hear from you guys. So let us know, write into the show, put it on the comments below. Ben has got the podcast email because it's escaped my brain.
Podcast at finewatches.com.au, and you can reach both Lewis and I there. And yeah, look, quite apart from anything else, let us know the stories. We're both watch collectors, and we want to hear some cool stories as well. Absolutely.
Yeah, exactly. Let us know in the comments below. And as always, like, subscribe, pass this on to your local collectors. Let them know that there's two weird Aussies and one Aussie, one partial fake Aussie British bloke just talking shit about watches online and trying to get through this journey with people and experience it together.
Indeed. Like, subscribe, comment, all that, because it helps us reach more people. And as always, thank you so much for listening to the FineWatches podcast. This has been episode 2 of season 2. And until next time, as always, enjoy.
Take care.